Yellowstone Supervolcano, activity in quake swarms, the observatory setup, and the caldera. This is the latest Caldera Chronicles, the origin story of Yellowstone Volcano Observatory, and this week's column written by scientist collaborators of Yellowstone from Robert Smith, Distinguished Research Professor with the University of Utah, and a founding member of the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory Consortium, and Marianne Gufanti, Emeritus Research Geologist, USGS. Volcano observatories sometimes have their origins in important geological events. For instance, the Cascades Volcano Observatory was established after the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens volcano, while the Alaska Volcano Observatory was realized after the 1986 eruption of the Augustine volcano. So those were very recent volcanic eruptions that caused the setup of the volcano observatories there. The roots of the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory lie at a different volcano altogether, Lassen Peak in California. Okay? Now, before Yellowstone Volcano Observatory founding, research had been conducted on the volcanism and tectonics of the Yellowstone region since the 1960s by the University of Utah, the U.S. Geological Survey, and Yellowstone National Park. In the year 2000, Dr. Robert Bob Smith, supervisor of the Yellowstone Seismic Network at the University of Utah, and Dr. Marianne Gufanti, program coordinator of the U.S. Geological Survey Volcano Program, were at a workshop at Lassen Volcano National Park, and while walking across Bum Pass Hell, a notable hydrothermal system similar to those of Yellowstone, Bob asked, "So why doesn't Yellowstone monitoring warrant status as an observatory, since we're doing just what the other observatories are doing?" Marianne thought for a moment and replied, "You're right, it should be." Also at the workshop were Bob Christensen, the lead USGS Yellowstone geologist, and Paul Doss, the Yellowstone National Park geologist. The four scientists gathered that evening and determined to make the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory a reality. A memorandum of understanding was signed in May 2001 by USGS, University of Utah, and Yellowstone National Park, and thus began the scientific cooperation as well as the distribution and archiving of research and monitoring information that has been the hallmark of YVO. Okay, but I know something else. That before that, the December of the year 2000, BBC came out with a documentary on the Yellowstone volcano, how dangerous the past eruptions were, and that there was no observatory there. And that's why the government decided to establish a Yellowstone Volcano Observatory for Yellowstone. It was because of the BBC documentary on the past super eruptions of Yellowstone, and that in fact it's a sleeping giant, as Dr. Michio Kaku keeps telling us, a Godzilla, sleeping Godzilla under Yellowstone. So thankfully they finally got the Yellowstone Volcano Observatory up and running in the year 2001. Now, the objectives of Yellowstone Volcano Observatory included seismic and ground deformation, the deformation, whether it's increasing or subsiding. The deformation is changes to the surface of the volcano that occur due to the magma movement underneath the surface. Most volcano deformation can only be detected and measured with precise surveying techniques such as with a global positioning system, GPS, a tilt meter, interferometric synthetic aperture radar or INSAR, or an electric distance meter, EDM. So they do take measurements of the deformation, the geologic monitoring of Yellowstone to enable timely warnings and information on possible renewed volcanism, hydrothermal activity, and earthquakes in the region. The observatory was specifically tasked with notifying Yellowstone National Park, local officials, and the public of significant seismic or volcanic events. Moreover, these goals were designed to improve scientific understanding of magmatic and tectonic processes that influence ongoing seismicity, surface deformation, and hydrothermal activity. Now, the tectonics are relating to the structural deformation of the Earth's crust, as we know. Now, importantly, the YVO improved coordination, communication, and cooperation among its members, regular discussions providing timely information and focused attention on the greatest needs for scientific and monitoring advances. During notable periods of unrest like 2008, 2009, and 2010 seismic swarms, and the 2003 thermal disturbance at Norris Geyser Basin, continuous communication between YVO scientists and Yellowstone National Park management convey the details and implications of the events. The YVO also served as a platform for coordinated improvements on the monitoring network in the region. A volcano and earthquake monitoring plan for Yellowstone was developed in 2006 to improve scientific understanding of the Yellowstone system and provide monitoring that could anticipate hazardous events before they occur. Also, YVO developed a formal plan to guide the response to any noteworthy volcanic, earthquake, and hydrothermal events. Among the needs of the observatory were to upgrade its seismic network to modern standards, and to add new seismograph stations in areas of the park lacking adequate station density, work that has been completed over the course of the past 15 years. YVO also facilitated the expansion of GPS monitoring, which was begun by the University of Utah, to include additional stations as well as boreholes, strain meters, and tilt meters that are now collectively operated by UNAVCO. In cooperation with Yellowstone National Park's geothermal monitoring program, data and interpretations from used stream gauges as well as discrete gas and water samples collected from around the region allow YVO to compare a broad range of geological and geophysical phenomena such as how hydrothermal systems respond to earthquakes. YVO further dedicated attention towards characteristics, the detailed behavior of geysers basins, both to detect any precursors to hydrothermal explosions and to monitor seismic and geodetical determined ground movement related to fluid migration, capabilities that were in need of upgrading prior to YVO's development. Finally, as a monitoring network consists not solely of instruments but also require a secure system for real-time data transmission, YVO encouraged updates of telemetry systems for seismic, GPS, and other data types, and also planned for future advances in monitoring technologies. The overall YVO monitoring strategy was to maximize the ability to provide rapid real-time assessment of changing conditions to ensure public safety, also to minimize environmental and visual impact, to provide the next generation seismic and ground deformation geodetic instrumentation, and to continue the communication of monitoring scientific information to the public, researchers, the National Park Service, and the USGS. Nowadays, it's not just the University of Utah, USGS, and Yellowstone National Park that make up YVO. In 2013, the consortium expanded to include the Montana Bureau of Mines and Geology, the Wyoming State Geological Survey, the Idaho Geological Survey, the University of Wyoming, and UNAVCO. And in 2020, YVO will be adding a new member. It says tune to Caldera Chronicles to find out who. Okay, so we will. And now this map concerning the red and blue spots. The red circles represent all seismicity and blue circles represent earthquakes as part of earthquake swarms. The size of the circles is scaled to the magnitude of the earthquakes. In the 630,000-year-old Yellowstone caldera is shown as a bold black line within the Yellowstone National Park, and mapped faults are shown as light gray lines. We know that Yellowstone is one of the 20 supervolcanoes of the world. It's the second largest supervolcano in the world. It's known to have the largest magma reservoir in the world underneath the magma chamber, and it has 60% of the world's geysers on it, and as well as 10,000 hydrothermal areas. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.